Donald Trump is not a complicated person. Fascinating, maybe, from certain angles. Consequential, unfortunately, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. But complicated? I don't think so. The more he says and does, the more attention he receives from the media, the longer his already interminable public life goes on, the more obvious he becomes. And it was pretty obvious who and what he was from the very beginning, all the way back in the early 1980s, when people outside of New York City started to know his name. He's not some puzzle to be solved. He's not some inscrutable enigma. He's one of the most shallow and transparent political figures in the history of this country. His motivation and his goal is clear. Maybe too clear. Maybe that's why some people insist on projecting this complexity onto him, treating him like he's this elusive figure, because they can't believe that he's as simple as he is. Donald Trump is who he is and does what he does because he is a profoundly insecure person. I'm not a psychiatrist. This is an observation, not a diagnosis, and it's an observation I feel pretty confident about. It's also an explanation, not an excuse. Trump's ignorance and bigotry and dishonesty and corruption and incompetence and narcissism and countless other deplorable qualities are rooted in his insecurity, but they are not absolved by it. He's a really, really, really bad person, just not a very deep one. Whenever I think of Trump, which I'm obliged to do way more often than I would like, I can't help but also think of Vince McMahon, the former owner of World Wrestling Entertainment. Trump and McMahon have a lot in common. They both have a history of dishonest, immoral, self-serving business practices. They're both raging egomaniacs. They've both been credibly accused of sexual assault by multiple women. And, of course, they've also worked together. But the one feature they share most strongly is that unfillable hole at the center of each of them. Like Vince McMahon, Donald Trump took over a business that had been built up into a success by his father. Like Vince McMahon, Donald Trump aspired to a level of success and legitimacy that his father never approached. Like Vince McMahon, though he's made a lot of money, gained a lot of fame, and become quite a powerful and influential figure, Donald Trump has never really attained the success and the legitimacy he spent his life chasing. Like Vince McMahon, Donald Trump is utterly amoral, unprincipled, and without shame. And most importantly, like Vince McMahon, Donald Trump has sought these goals, this success, this legitimacy, while refusing to change or being unable to change who he is. For both Trump and McMahon, that's been the most stubborn obstacle between them and what they want. They crave respect, plainly and pathetically, but they never get it because they are fundamentally unworthy of it. The biggest difference between the two is that Vince McMahon is, or rather was, a pro wrestling promoter, and his influence, though considerable, is mostly limited to that sphere, whereas Donald Trump was the President of the United States and is seeking that office again. So when he acts out from his place of insecurity, it's a problem for all of us. Trump seems to sincerely believe that he can earn that respect he covets by convincing people that he's accomplished impressive things, not by actually accomplishing impressive things, but by claiming to have done so and getting people to believe him. Everything about his public-facing persona is artifice. Virtually every claim he makes about himself or his business or his presidency is at best a self-serving distortion and frequently a complete fabrication. As a young man trying to make a name for himself in New York City, he claimed his father's wealth as his own. When he built Trump Tower in Manhattan, he had the top floor labeled the 68th floor, even though the building actually has only 58 floors. He characterizes himself as a tough and capable businessman who built a multi-billion-dollar empire through his own hard work and genius, when the truth is, he was kept afloat by constant financial support from his father. His businesses have gone bankrupt 6 different times, and he's only ever made significant money from licensing his name to various properties and products and working as the host of a reality show where he played the role of a successful tycoon, something he never actually was. Though he constantly insists otherwise, his presidency was a failure marked by incompetence and corruption. He was deeply unpopular. His administration did serious damage to the global reputation of the United States and to the people of the United States, especially in its final year when Trump's gross mismanagement of the COVID-19 outbreak prolonged the deadliest stage of the pandemic and contributed to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. Though he protests his innocence and insists he is the victim of a now years-long legal and political witch hunt, Trump has been credibly accused of numerous crimes, convicted on many charges already, with more yet to be decided. Most Americans, nearly everyone outside of his cultish bubble of ride-or-die supporters, regard him as a disgrace, a national embarrassment. His stump speeches at campaign rallies, where even some of those aforementioned diehards can no longer bear to stay until the end, have deteriorated into endless, rambling, incoherent rants filled with stale, rehashed personal grievances, insults, bizarre digressions, threats, racist and xenophobic incitement, and most of all, lies. Almost every public statement he makes is a lie to one degree or another. Almost everything he'll ever tell you, especially if it's about himself, is a lie. But here's the truth. No matter who he wants you to believe him to be, no matter who he wishes he was, Donald Trump can never be anyone other than who he is. And who is he? I don't know him personally. I don't want to know him personally. And as I said already, I'm definitely no psychiatrist or psychologist or someone with special insight into human nature. But as I also said already, it couldn't be more evident for all to see. Beneath the bravado and the boasting and the bigotry, beneath the unconvincing tough guy act, beneath the laughable pretensions to being a person of class and taste, beneath the tissue paper thin veneer of confidence, Donald Trump is a person who desperately wants to impress other people. He wants to be thought of as a strong guy, a smart guy, a guy who can solve problems just by picking up the phone and telling the other guys how it's going to be. He's none of those things, but that's how he wants us to think of him. He wants to be thought of as a success, even though the credit for every success he's ever claimed has rightfully belonged to someone else. Doesn't matter. That's how he wants us to think of him. And I wonder if somewhere, buried under all the narcissism and persecution complexes and self-replicating conspiracy theories, he has enough self-awareness to recognize that he's not impressive to people, at least not to the people he really wants to impress. And I wonder if it gnaws at that raw nerve of insecurity at his heart. Donald, do you ever ask yourself why you're not good enough? Do you ever say to yourself, I'm one of the most famous people in the world, why doesn't that impress them? There's a skyscraper with my name on it that's one of the tallest buildings in New York City. Why doesn't that impress them? I was the president of the United States. Why doesn't that impress them? It's you, Donald. That's why it doesn't impress us, because it's you. It's not where you were born. Nobody cares that you're from Queens, not from Manhattan. Nobody cares that your family wasn't old New York money. It's not what you look like. Plenty of people with worse hair than yours have become revered figures in American history, and maybe even a few with smaller hands. It's nothing to do with your origins or any circumstances you had no control over. It's who you are, who you have chosen to be, while spending the past 78 years trying in vain to fill that hole at the center of you. It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much money you falsely claim to have. It doesn't matter how many buildings bear your name or what the ratings were the last time you were on TV or what the attendance number was at your most recent rally. It doesn't matter that you were the president. And it won't matter even if you're the president again. None of that changes who you are. That insecurity you're constantly fighting against, constantly trying to erase, to prove wrong, that's the most truthful thing about you. Because the truth, whether you ever admit it to yourself or not, is that you are not an impressive person. All that respect you demand from others, you don't deserve it. You'll never get it. Not from the people who actually look at you with clear eyes. We know who you are. Everybody knows. We see you.